So my name is Lewis Henshaw. I currently work as an FP&A manager for one of the leading two-person logistics companies within the UK. I've recently completed all my CIMA exams and utilised Astranti to enable me to do that, predominantly using Astranti for the case study exams. Through their resources, I was able to achieve, firstly, a commendation for the management case study, and then furthermore was able to achieve to gain a high achiever award in the final exam, which I'm extremely proud of. So I think the first feeling that I had was shock. You don't really expect to score so highly, especially in the last exam, given the pass rates and how difficult that exam can be. So shock was probably the first emotion, and then I was really proud of my achievement. It kind of showed that all the hard work that you put in actually pays off. And I was grateful for the support that I received. So firstly, I obviously got the support from Astranti. Their resources basically put me in a position to be able to achieve what I did. I was grateful from my work's perspective. They've obviously helped to fund that study and give me time off to be able to sit the exams, which again is really important. I think lastly, sort of my family and friends, when you start sort of seeing a journey, you know it's going to be a good few years before you can complete it. And often it feels like it's a never-ending task and you're never going to be able to finally be able to say, I've completed my studying and my exams. So again, without them, I don't think I would have been able to achieve what I did. So I think in terms of preparation, I'll be honest, I did do quite a lot. I finished my final objective tests in around the August, and the case study was in the November, towards the end of November. So I had a couple of weeks off after the objective test. At that point, then I started to re-review sort of key topics and areas from the older sort of objectives tests that I'd done a lot earlier in the year, because obviously I needed to refresh my memory on those. And was kind of then waiting for that sort of pre-scene material to be released in the September time. That's when it kind of becomes a bit more intense. Once that pre-scene's released, you understand the company you're going to be doing the case study on. And at that point, then that's where Astranti really helped, because they give you a really good structure in terms of what you should be looking to achieve every single week. I was basically dedicating a lot of weekends to be able to do that, because obviously I'm in full-time work. And then trying to obviously catch up and do some bits after work, maybe for an hour in the evening, just to try and keep on top of things, try and like look at previous past papers, key revision theories. So I think all in all, I would put the time and dedication that I put into the study was part of the reason why I was able to achieve such a high score in the final exam. I think the first thing that you do struggle with is trying to get that dedicated time. Life does try and get in the way, and I think trying to carve out that time and be able to ensure that you've got allocated study time allocated on weekends and evenings is key, and ensuring that sort of that is in the right environment as well is pretty vital. I think one of the other things that I did struggle with was going back through the theories from previous older objective tests, because obviously that sort of material is 6 months old since you potentially looked at it. The way that I overcome that was, one, I started early. So I did start to look at that stuff, as I said, within September, before the pre-scene was even released. And then once the pre-scene was released, I tried to find previous sort of mock exams or examples of exams in which those topics came up, and then try and create a plan for each of those answers to see how I would have answered that in the real exam. I always found that to do a good answer, if you can do a good plan, it gives you the structure, and then it's easier to write it. So that was one of my ways that I kind of tried to overcome those theories, was specifically find questions and plan answers for them. I would say do as many mocks as possible. They're not easy, they're not nice to do, but they are really beneficial, because especially with sort of the Astranti course, you get feedback from your tutor. So that feedback was vital, because it would give you areas to improve on. I would then utilise that feedback and specifically focus on that in the next exam, and you'll slowly but surely see your mock scores start to build and get better and better. I think, again, as I say, is carving out dedicated time. So making sure that's in the right environment as well. So for me, on a weekend, we've got an office at home. I would spend time in that, away from distractions, away from sort of TV, the dog, and just kind of make sure that I was in there as an intense sort of couple of hours at a time, take a break and go back again. You can also get burnout if you don't get enough breaks in there. So then it becomes a bit of a mind-numbing activity to try and study. So it's better to do focus time, take a break and go back and do some more later. And I think the final thing that I would say to help them would be try and gain as many industry examples as you can that you can use to support answers. I think one of the things that I found, particularly when I was doing my mocks, is my scores massively improved when I did that, because I was able to evidence real life examples to support points. It gives more depth to an answer. So I went in with sort of maybe 10, 12 industry examples that I could use for different sort of theories or potential unseen material that could come up, that I could then add them to support answers. And again, I think that's pretty vital to scoring really highly in the exam. I think when you go into the exam, it can be quite daunting. You obviously know that there's a time pressure. So I think the first thing is don't panic. Ultimately, with these exams, there's not necessarily a right or a wrong answer. As long as you can support your points, you can still score really highly. So within the strategic case study, my first question was on whether or not they should move operations to a foreign country, and there was problems with employment law. And my viewpoint on that was, no, we shouldn't do that. It then turns out in the second unseen part of the exam, they decided to do it. So even though I hadn't necessarily agreed with what came through for moving forward, I still scored really highly. So as long as you support your points, you'll do pretty well. I think the other tips I would say is plan your answers. Make sure that you plan them. Taking 10 minutes out of the exam to plan the answers for the unseen section gives you really good structure. It can also help with time management, because you can make sure that you're allocating enough time to where the highest marks can be achieved. And by planning, you enable yourself to do that. If you go in really quickly and try and start writing your answers, there's potential that you'll waste time on certain areas that aren't going to score you very high marks. I think there's probably two more bits. So firstly, I never really looked at the pre-seen in the exam. I've revised certain key areas, key points that I knew I could raise in many questions, so that I didn't have to keep flicking backwards and forwards. I think the other thing that I would do is, within every question, is make a recommendation. Recommendations give great depth to answers, and it also enables you to gain marks quite easily, because you're ultimately repeating your arguments from above to say why you've made a decision. It can help students stand out, because it shows that you've not only been able to do the analysis, but you then also be able to recommend a strategic decision for the business, which is ultimately what CIMA are trying to test you in these exams. And again, as I say, it's quite easy to support points because you've already done the hard work. It's just summarising it at the very end.